so. We told you that Kimi Antonelli could become the only teenager to win two Grand Prix. We told you he could be the first one or the youngest one to win two in history. We told you he could be the youngest person to lead the World Championship. And here we are today with exactly that happening. Probably not in a way that we expected, given the way things were panning out at the start of this race. But my word, that was some enjoyable Japanese Grand Prix. Welcome along, folks, to the Inside Line F1 podcast. Soumil Arora here with Kunal Shah. We both commentate on the Hindi Formula One broadcast on Fan Code, among many other things in the world of motorsport. But today was my day off from Formula One, Kunal. Today I was working on MotoGP. I got to step back and then watch the Formula One race with you and Chetan on the broadcast on Fan Code. And for once, stepping back from Formula One, I was like, this wasn't too bad of a race. I actually enjoyed my hour and a half. How fun was it for you in the commentary booth?
It was absolutely fun. Like you said, we told you so. There was one more we told you so. We told you Formula One would change qualifying, and they did, right? To whatever little effect, but they're trying different things. And the one thing we did not tell you so was how worried we were about the racing not being good. We all knew that 130R Casio triangle would be embarrassing, but it wasn't as embarrassing, right? Somil, we listen, it's not perfect, but it definitely wasn't, driving past somebody on the motorway.
Yeah.
It was still, I loved how Lewis was holding the line on the inside, making sure, Shah was on the outside, or whoever was trying to attack him. Pierre Gasly did the same thing to Max Verstappen as well. So lots of we told you so moments. And listen, I mean, yes, 4 weeks before the next race, there will be changes. Formula One is changing. There is a new youngster we are talking about. There's a new world championship leader we are talking about. So let's get started with that, because
Oh.
FIA is going to do all the changes and we'll talk about it. But I think it was a fairly entertaining race. It was one of those races where when commentary ended, I was like, yeah, my throat needs some rest. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I must have been tricky for you guys because I only remember that patch after the safety car, I think 10, 15 odd laps later, where it simmered down a little bit. But then at the end, Hamilton versus Norris was an incredible battle. Leclerc managed to keep George Russell off. Incredible. Like, this is what racing's all about.
That's that's what racing is all about. Soumil Arora in the middle of the 130R decides to sneeze, because that's what racing is all about. We've seen all our heroes do it. But yeah, I think let's break it down, because there we go. There's one more. Godspeed, Soumil. Let's break it. Now I've lost focus on.
No, we'll bring you
I
back.
knew
We'll
I
bring
know
you
what
back.
corner I'm
It's
at. I know what gear I'm on. But okay, why don't you hit that again?
no, we should bring you back to the racing, and we should talk about this before we go to Kimi or before we go to Max and how disgruntled he's feeling, and also about the crash with Oliver Behrman, but generally the racing because that's what will stick with us for the longest. Yes, there was yo-yo racing, Kunal, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and if anything, I leave the Japanese GP wanting more because I really wanted to see what would happen if the safety car didn't come out. The battle between Piastri, Russell, and Antonelli on pure pace, I really think we've missed out on something here, in spite of getting such a good race.
That is absolutely the feeling I had, saying, what did the safety car do? It actually flipped the race around, because there were drivers who got lucky with it. And then, as always, there were drivers who got unlucky with it, especially in an era where we are only seeing single stopping races. Max said the tires just didn't degrade, so we could go flat out. And unfortunately, that's one of those things where, because your rival's tires are not degrading, you're not able to attack, even if you have fresher tires, right? So one of those deltas that we've seen all along in Formula One, where you just have older tires and I have new and I attack you, that was also not there. But I'll put it this way: uh, Oscar Piastri has shown, McLaren has shown that Mercedes's dominance can be broken this early in the rules cycle. They have shown that if they start, they actually have a fairly decent car. And they have shown that when they start, they are the second quickest car and not Ferrari. Because Oscar Piastri and his engineer were convinced that the race win was theirs had it not been for the safety car.
Hmm.
And they were convinced they could
Okay.
hold George Russell back. as well, even though while he couldn't chase Kimi Antonelli down. So, are we discussing George's race that
Just
went away, or Oscar's race that was almost there, or Kimi Antonelli running away with it?
no, that comment really is, it kind of puzzles me. I like McLaren and the belief. I like McLaren's belief about the fact that they think that they could have won this race had the safety car not come out. And yes, the early signs were pointing towards it. But then come on, Kunal, we saw that, right? Antonelli was able to run away with it. I know clean air and everything, but I don't know. I still think there's a big gulf between Mercedes and McLaren. But what you said was so right, that Mercedes are not invincible. And in these new regulations where the yo-yo racing comes to effect and you get passed and you get repassed and all that stuff around, once you get stuck in one of those battles, you get stuck. And we saw that for such a long time. And that's maybe Mercedes' biggest weakness.
It is, and I think why Kimi could run away with it was he got clean air, and then he could just drive off into the distance, which is what we've seen always every time in Formula One. Clean air is king, and Kimi Raikkonen, the minute he got clean air, he realized two things: A, I have clean air, and second, guess what? George, who could actually beat me or who could even dream of beating me, I have a couple of cars between him and me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hammer it down. And he kept building that gap. And very interesting, Soumil. Their overtaking seemed easier in the early part of the race, but not so much so in the latter part of the race. And there are 2 points to this. First is, as we saw in qualifying, McLaren, even though they have the Mercedes engine, they were using a different engine mapping. They were quicker in different parts of the circuit compared to the Mercedes, and McLaren was actually quicker on those straights, which is why different engine mapping, what Andrea Stella was complaining about, actually got solved to a certain extent in Suzuka. So that was one, and then the second, very interestingly, as the race progressed, the team and their strategy engineers learned better energy deployment strategies. So they realized
Hmm.
where they can attack, where they can defend using energy deployment. And as they picked up more data in racing conditions, they could just hold back rivals. So, as we've always known, the more data, the more laps that F1 teams do, the smarter they get. That's what happened in the case of overtaking, which is why there was so much more overtaking at the start of the race than the latter part of the race. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's actually very true because when Andrea Stella initially said that Mercedes have been unfair with us, paraphrasing, and we are at a disadvantage being a customer team, I was like, with time, this will solve itself. And I think we are we are seeing the effect of that. But still, Mercedes were amazing, blisteringly quick. You cannot fault George Russell at all. But still, he walks away, dropping points. And before we go to Kimi, I would just want to put this out there, Kunal. It's a big question that's running in my head. At the end of the year, will we look back at China and Japan and be like, these two races potentially costed Russell the title? Because Spain last year, when Verstappen lost his patience and bumped into Russell, I know that's the reason why he kicked out a journalist and he got annoyed by it, but it's a valid question to ask. Max did, in part, lose the title thanks to that one moment, although you can't fully, fairly, and squarely blame it on him. And this could be something similar because we have a 1 month break before Formula One returns, almost as long as the difference between the 25 and the 26 season, the first time the cars got on track. A lot could change, Kunal. We don't know if Mercedes are going to be as good. And I wonder if we look back at these two races and if we look at it and say this is where George lost a whole heap of points.
that's a brilliant point because, yes, there are 22 races remaining, but there are 2 points to keep in mind. First, Frederick Vasseur of Ferrari is convinced that after Miami, there's a new world championship altogether. He always says that, right? I said this on the fan code broadcast. You're not a Ferrari team principal if you don't make such outrageous statements. Remember Matteo Binotto? You always remind me of him. It was 2019, I remember, right? There are 10 races.
22, 22.
Was it 22?
Yeah,
Matteo
when
Yeah, yeah,
Max
yeah.
ended up dominating.
And he
Yeah.
said there are 10 races to go, and I don't see why Ferrari can't win all 10 of them, right? Something like that, right?
Has
Uh,
to say something about his team principal as well now.
yeah, yeah. So that was one that Miami, at least Ferrari says things are going to change, and I don't know what that changes. Let's see. And then the second, of course, is compression ratio gate. So if Mercedes ends up losing, the advantage over compression ratios, which is the wide belief in the paddock that things will level out. They will look back and say, "Wow, did George just lose a heap of points?" And we should discuss that. George, was he unlucky? Do you think they call it unlucky because two races back to back messed up qualifying? This race, he just had he said one lap. All it took was one lap. And had the safety car come out a lap later, I would have been here discussing with you in the media pen as a victor of the race. Do you think he was right in saying luck played a big factor?
It clearly did, didn't it? Russell did not look as fast as Antonelli in the first stint, and also in the last one because he got caught up. But he was so confident, and his confidence was actually. I like that. I like the fact that he's going so bullish on himself that I know I could have won when all the signs don't directly or very clearly point that Russell would have clearly won this race, which is great because we now have a confident but slightly a confident and smiley Kimi Antonelli versus George Russell, who's now seeing this as his best and, for all we know, his only chance of winning a world championship. And it almost feels like the sound of frustration about things being let go from his hand, and then he's turning it around into, I could have won this.
Can you imagine? I mean, okay, I'm going to take some comments. We've got some fantastic comments. Just a quick break in Russell versus Antonelli, something we never thought would happen, but the script is flipped in just the first three races of the season, or so we think so. And okay, Ferrari's car is suited to Monaco. Leclerc's second home race win. Jamal is here. Thank you. Yes, that's what everyone thinks, but let's not jump at it. At this point, Mercedes should be put on hards and go long to maintain clean air and good pace. Yes, but they're not having the best of starts. Mercedes' Achilles' heels are race starts. And Toto Wolff was joking that I'm going to send Kimi Antonelli to a driving school where they teach you how to drive with clutches because Kimi Antonelli has had three bad starts. In Melbourne, he lost 5 places. In China, he lost 1 place. And in Japan, also, he lost 5 places at the very start. And then Mark Shell Rude is here. I don't know if that's the Norwegian pronunciation. You guys were great describing the soul of Suzuka yesterday. That monstrosity was so that monstrosity of a race was so disrespectful of that special racetrack. Which,
Qualifying for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm going to quote Oscar Piastri. He said, "We were quicker than the Mercedeses on the S's, and that actually didn't work for us." And then he said, "That was a bit weird of me to even think of that because typically the quicker you go, like Leclerc said, the more I push the car, the slower it goes." So definitely not qualifying as well. But when it comes to racing, yes, it's not the perfect way of racing. Yes, it is yo-yo racing, even though Lewis Hamilton says it's not. And I'll tell you why I disagree with him. But ultimately, we are still seeing four cars or four different teams fighting for the race winner, at least three of them with Alpine a little distant away. So it's not the best way, but it's not as bad, Soumil. What do you think?
No, the racing is fine. It's just that the cars don't excite me as much. It's,
You sound like Max Verstappen. Or
yeah.
Lando Norris actually said the drivers, sorry, he said the fans are happy, all are getting overtaking and excitement, but the drivers are happy and nobody cares. Drivers are not happy and nobody cares about that. And why don't we just jump to Max Verstappen?
Yeah, we
All along,
should. Yeah.
all along,
Yeah.
Formula One has always been a political mess. Manufacturers would politicize the sport to get rules that they can basically convince their boardrooms to spend millions on to go racing on Formula One. Is this one of the first times in recent times, Somil, that the best driver on the planet has now told Formula One, I am leaving if you are not making changes because this is not racing and you cannot convince me otherwise? Is that the power of Max Verstappen?
Well, that's the power of every human being because we all have the right to leave if we don't like something. It's all down to us. Max has just been the most vocal. But you're right.
But my
He's the
point is he said they know what changes I want. And I love the boldness in that statement. Jos has made noise. Eric van Haren, who's the Dutch journalist, has already written, a comment on, Max could just leave after 2026. And Max has said it's not about fighting for P7, P8. I'm happy to fight for P7, P8 if it comes to that. But the way in which I'm fighting is not what I'm happy about, which makes sense, right?
I agree with him. I agree with him. I'll be honest, I'm having to treat Formula One as something that's separate from all the other motorsport that I watch. It's like the special member of our family that, oh, it's different, it's all right. It's just the way it is. Because I end up watching WRC and IndyCar and and DTM and all the other amazing championships around the world, and you're like, oh, this is just the one way we know racing, and then Formula One comes up and it's just different, which will inevitably have casualties, I feel. And I agree with Max. I agree with Max. It's just not the same. I'm just slightly worried about the next generation of drivers that come up, Kunal, and whether they would want to go racing in this way, and how do we train them? Because the entire ladder in the pipeline pushes you towards driving in a certain way, right? Like pushing flat out, trying to extract maximum corner speed right from day one when you get into motorsport of any kind. Now, this is counterintuitive and weird to say the least. So it's
That's a great point, because when you go through Formula 3 and you go to Formula 2, what is qualifying all about? Finding clean air, making sure you deal with the cues, and making sure you nail your sectors. And suddenly you
even
come to
go
Formula 1.
karting.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
go karting. And, this is where I disagree with Lewis Hamilton on his point that this is not yo yo racing, because that's what we do in go karts as well. Yes, it happens in go karts where you're overtaking, you get overtaken back, and then you make an overtake again. But that racing is down to talent. It's not down to, hey, I've run out of battery, so why don't you go past me? I mean, Max
Hmm.
Verstappen waved past Pierre Gasly because he's like, I just don't have battery. Imagine what's box office entertainment? Max Verstappen defending. Is he going to go all crazy? Will he keep it clean? Will he keep it between the white lines?
Yeah.
You don't get that. Max is not even going to try and stretch the limits. Why? Because he's like, I don't have battery. And Lando Norris said this as well. He said, I didn't want to make an overtake on Lewis, but then I just made the overtake because it seems Lewis ran out of battery, only to then be overtaken later. So this is definitely not what we've grown up with. And this is why we think Formula One will make changes. This is why we think, like Uttara is saying, a man can move mountains and a whole sport. This is what I think Max Verstappen will be remembered for, that he forced Formula One's hand to make sure he protected the one thing he loved to do the most, which is go racing and drive flat out.
I also then want to take a couple of perspectives on this. But first, the Tifosi has a very interesting perspective we should bring up. I respect and love Max, but he doesn't always have to be right in what he says and play a victim card. He's saying this because he has a slow car. Now,
Hmm.
that's a bold opinion if there ever was one. And there could be some part in it because suddenly it feels like we're in 2008 and the sister Red Bull team is now ahead of the Red Bull team, which is crazy. It's freaky when I was watching. It's like, am I watching a race from 2008? And the Toro Rossos are doing better than the Red Bulls, but that's something. But on a broader sense, Kunal, in just this whole drama, around the cars and around the way of driving and how it's so different. And this will spill over into Miami and beyond because Formula One and the FIA have said that they are intending to discuss changes and there are meetings lined up. And why? We should also get to that in a second. But generally, I'm just wondering, this will not go away for the next 3 to 5 years at least, Kunal. We've committed to a new power unit and a way of doing things. It's going to be there, right? I don't think something fundamental can change that quickly, can it?
I think they'll have to break it down. They'll have to change it slowly within rules, within frameworks, within designs. Like they're trying to already play around with qualifying, harvesting energy levels. So that's one area. The second area is, can they increase the kilojoules per hour, basically the fuel flow rate going into the races? Of course, not all of it is fixable because the size of the fuel tanks is decided already beforehand based on what was the agreed, fuel flow within the rules. So maybe that 2026 is patchwork with the guarantee that things will be different in 2027. Teams will be given allowances because Formula One, and I've been reading these comments on Twitter as well, that the FIA themselves realize that this whole 50-50 approach that they're trying to take between the combustion engine and the battery packs is something that's probably gone down the wrong way. So I get a feeling changes are coming, whether it's the driver leading at the front, or whether it's the amount of battery you're going to put, or whether it's how you drive these cars. These changes will come. This is not what's Formula One. This is not what's become of Formula One, and this is not what will be of Formula One, Soumil.
Yeah, I just hope it changes for the better. Qualifying is just the saddest part of them all. But at least we get to see good racing. But in that, there's also more concerns about not just how we drive, but speed differences and how that could have an impact. And we saw a big impact of speed differences, literally a 50G impact. Oliver Behrman in the wall. And you've noticed something very interesting about this entire incident, Kunal. Colapinto, was he really super clipping? Was he really harvesting energy?
Not that I could see. When I saw all the onboards, and we saw this in real time, we saw the replays on the fan code broadcast that we were commentating on. There were no lights. Super clipping means you need to have lights coming on. And Charles Leclerc himself said that, oh, I didn't see the lights. So what was Colapinto doing? Did he make a mistake? Or was that like we know those 0 kilowatt zones where you're just running on ICE power? And if that was the case, should Oliver Behrman have been, expecting to see a slower car there, knowing that there's a gap that he knew he had to Colapinto? So lots of questions, and I don't know why the FIA did not investigate this. Of course, the conspiracy theory on Twitter is the FIA didn't investigate it because then the investigation would have said that these are the dangers of harvesting and deploying. And when they are so aggressive, you can have such high closing speeds that can cause accidents. I mean, when was the last time we saw a driver limping the way Oliver Behrman did when he limped? I almost thought it was like the 70s or the 80s when drivers were limping, had a marshal help them, hop on one leg, back two behind the barriers, and so on.
I don't remember, honestly. I really don't remember. Driver limping after a crash.
Imagine if Soumil Arora doesn't remember it. It's. I know some people have written to me on Twitter saying sometimes it was Daniel Ricciardo at some point in a Renault in the 2021
Yeah.
Styrian Grand Prix, maybe, but
Max after the British GP 21, where he
but he
got.
was not limping either.
Yeah, he was
He,
stretchered off,
he,
wasn't he?
he
He was.
but at least the stretcher. Or yeah, okay, that's probably worse off, right? But yeah,
No, but it's insane. It's insane. Very crazy incident that happening at a very high
speed
commitment part of the
section.
circuit. It's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of mental.
But since you're talking of Max, the Tifosis, I respect and love Max, and we already discussed this. Is he playing a victim card? And there's a counter to that from Jamal, who says, "Is it a coincidence as the Mercedes drivers have praised the regulations and said they enjoy them? If you're winning, you enjoy it. Am I right?" And I guess so, right? You're winning. You don't want the compression ratios to change. You don't want anyone to catch up. You want to be dominating, and you want to just battle the one driver who's in the garage next to you. We all love that.
Yeah, literally. It's so interesting. Hey, but speaking of battles, Kunal, one thing came up to mind. Cadillac.
Yeah.
They were faster than Aston Martin this weekend. Is nobody going to talk about Cadillac? Is nobody going to talk about the fact that the team with only 3 Grand Prix under their belt actually ended up beating the team which has had a lot more, and a factory power unit, and Fernando Alonso, and Adrian Newey, and a new factory, and a new wind tunnel, and some of the best technical heads in Formula One, and an almost unlimited budget.
And at Honda's home race, right?
Yes.
And what is Honda and Aston Martin? What are they going to celebrate? Wow, Fernando Alonso finished a race. For the first time in 2026, Aston Martin finished a Grand Prix. And Alonso said, of course, all the information and data is going to help us. But hats off to Cadillac for doing what they're doing against Aston Martin. Although, like I said, I'm more on the likes of, dude, you don't just participate in a world championship, you try and win it when you have to. But anyway, That's the long and short of Cadillac. I love how, despite them being so slow, Checo Perez decided he should have a go at Valtteri Bottas, and he spun, or they both tangled in the Chinese Grand Prix. We never talked about it, but Sadhana saying it was a fun weekend to watch overall. Yes, we discussed that. Why it was fun, nevertheless. And the Tifosi says there's no going back on the power units because there are already plans about the 2030 net zero project. I don't entirely agree with that view. I think Formula One will realize that net zero carbon is going to happen, but we need to make sure we protect the DNA of Formula One, what we go racing for overall, right?
I wonder who Formula One listens to. I wonder what those meetings are like when the FI and Formula One are sitting together, and when they weigh in opinions, whose opinion seems to be heavier. Because the FI have tried to solve a very clear problem of a lack of overtaking and drivers finding it tough to follow other cars. So they've optimized everything for that, and the fact that we need to get more manufacturers in, so we need more battery power. But now, Kunal, when we have these new meetings happening between now and Miami, I wonder who they listen to. I wonder whose opinion they take more seriously than others.
I would say they realize they need to listen to the drivers more, given that these drivers literally act like they're being forced to drive cars. Max has said, yes, it's a lot of money, and Lando Norris has said it's a great privilege and a lot of money, but this is not racing, including the likes of Carlos Sainz, who's generally not so outspoken in the public. I hope the one person that they do listen to is Max Verstappen, because it would be embarrassing if Formula One ends up losing the best driver on the planet as we speak, Soumil. Okay, why don't we just do a quick one on what if Max Verstappen actually retires from Formula One at the end of 2026? What are the three things you believe could happen?
Verstappen becomes a full-time endurance racing nomad and brings the sport to so many people, which I'm very excited for. But in Formula One, Lindblad replaces him.
So Lindblad goes to Red Bull Racing,
Red
you're
Bull
saying. Red Bull
Racing,
Racing is Lindblad and Hadjar.
yeah,
Okay.
the
So you're saying
sport,
there's no external hire.
maybe not, but the sport forgets and moves on. That's what it always does.
Yeah, it always does. But okay, that's the easy part. So you're saying Hadjar and Lindblad in Red Bull Racing. Who do you think comes to Racing Bulls then?
Ooh, who's the next good Red Bull Junior?
So some Red Bull Junior, next Red Bull Junior, or is it Yuki Tsunoda who finds his way back and Lindblad gets another year at Racing Bulls? That
I
could
mean,
be one of the
do you not
things.
want to hire Formula E drivers now that we know that Formula One could be very similar? Just
Jake
just
Den-
thinking.
Jake Dennis already is a Red Bull Racing simulator, driver. That's maybe that could be one as well. And Jamal
Yeah,
is here saying if Max Verstappen retires, Racing Bulls becomes the main team. I don't understand that, but
it
okay.
could well be. I mean, it's the way it's going right now. Hey,
Yeah,
well,
but what else could happen? What
if
else? Who so we lose one world champion, which means there will be just three world champions on the grid, right? So Horner's gone, Newey's gone, Wheatley's gone, Marco's gone. Is Max
Marcus,
Verstappen the next stumbling block in the Red Bull Racing garage?
it's crazy. Can you imagine fans in the past? And we all used to be like, Red Bull Racing has no heritage, no history, nothing to go back to. For some, it was a plastic team in a way that it's a new team that comes up and starts afresh. But as is the case with new teams that end up doing well, you create a history and a lineage. And Red Bull will lose a big part of their history with Max gone. It would people connect with Red Bull Racing, Kunal, if Max is not there?
Wow. And if Red Bull Racing doesn't have a headline driver like Ricardo or Vettel or Verstappen, would that even be a brand? Is Red Bull Racing in the same space as Ferrari, where they need to have the most popular world champion or world champion elect driver, even though they had Sainz and Leclerc? But Leclerc has always been that driver who celebrated like a world champion, even though he's not won a world championship. I think they're going to have an external hire, but who could they hire externally as well, right? Because Leclerc wouldn't jump ship. At least I think so. Maybe he could be the one jumping ship, but who would jump to Red Bull as they are now? Leclerc would jump to them if they were winning races, right? Because that's something he's not doing with that Ferrari, right? So Hamilton, Alonso? No, nobody's going to go to Red Bull if it's a midfield team. Pierre
Yeah.
Gasly goes back. Wow,
Could be. I would take him back. I
what a
would take
soup!
him back.
Wow.
Well, well.
Okay, interesting.
It's
So, what if
crazy time.
scenarios have been discussed? And we're going to have 4 weeks to the next race before we call this episode to a close. Which teams and drivers would prefer the break that's coming, Soumil? And then let's do a list of who wouldn't. Top three
Sure.
picks. Who would prefer the
Leclerc
break?
and Ferrari and Lewis
Why?
Hamilton because they need a stronger engine and hopefully they have more time to develop it. Number one,
And of course, Frederick Vasseur has been saying Ferrari will use the additional development unit, whatever that they get, where they show that they've got a more than 2% deficit and they'll bring upgrades to the Ferrari engine. So it's contingent on Ferrari and the FIA agreeing that Ferrari's power unit has a deficit to Mercedes. Otherwise, there's no upgrades coming.
yeah, yeah,
So,
that
okay.
has to happen.
So you're saying it's Ferrari, Leclerc, Hamilton, because clearly they're lacking power deployment. They're good at they're great at race starts, but beyond that, they just cannot break into a Mercedes or a Mercedes powered team at the front, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, who else would welcome the break? Red Bull Racing, Max Verstappen,
Max Verstappen, he would get the chance to drive better cars.
but also not struggle and suffer in that Red Bull Racing Ford engine. But they need to develop the car as well as the power unit. And I'm sure they would appreciate this time off. Maybe Aston Martin Honda is third on the list.
Yeah, yeah,
By
big
what
time.
race will they recover, right? Because they clearly can't keep circulating for 24 races this season. At least if we were to go by Lance Stroll saying we're not racing, we're just circulating.
Them for sure. Uh,
I wish he would have thought of becoming a meme himself. We are not racing, we are strolling around and just played around on his. Okay, who else? Haas has
yeah,
been really good. They wouldn't want the break. So teams and
uh,
drivers who wouldn't want the break, of course, Mercedes, 2 races
yeah.
less. McLaren, maybe after seeing that, oh, we are comfortably there and thereabouts, we wouldn't have wanted a break, even though, Piastri said maybe it's a circuit that came to McLaren. Al-
Otherwise, Haas, as you rightly mentioned,
Haas and
Alpine.
Alpine wouldn't want this break.
Yeah,
Similarly, I would put Williams back in the previous list, saying Williams would definitely want this break. I mean, the race was over, and within an hour, James Walls had put out a video saying how every hour for the next 4 months or 4 weeks is going to be so crucial for the development of Williams. And I think he's turning out to be a great orator and management consultant and so on. Let's hope he is able to deliver on those changes, right? And
yeah,
who else? Audi? I think they would have liked to not have the
yeah. They
break.
would have liked to carry on. They've got a good run of momentum. Like solid top speeds this weekend. Great in qualifying too, up until a certain point. Yeah, Audi. Yeah, I'm just wondering though. It's only Formula One that's taking a break. Like this is WEC this month.
No, no, don't
Is
don't don't jump, don't jump
is
series. Wait, stick to the list. Stick to the list. There's very few people who watch the WEC and all the stuff.
oh
That's
come on.
that's also racing. I know you have a massive passion for that. But maybe Cadillac is happy to get the break. They'll get more time to understand what they've done. I don't know. Miami is their first home race of the season. They would definitely be like, yeah, okay. So that's
Yeah,
that's that's
yeah.
that off our list. And just quick words on not Kimi Raikkonen, Kimi
You
Antonelli.
almost made the same mistake the announcer at the Chinese GP did.
Yeah, absolutely. But final words, Kimi Antonelli. What a drive,
Yeah.
right?
It's very rare, Kunal, that you get to see this level of composure from a teenager after winning a race. Did it just feel like it was normal for him? Because that's what I felt.
Yeah, and you always say this, and I appreciate it that every race, your first race win changes you psychologically, mentally, you get more confident. And there was something about Kimi this race weekend where I was like, wow, he's driven today the way we've seen Max do, Lewis does, Sebastian Vettel did. You get clean air. You realize this is where you pounce. You pounce onto your drivers. He was consistent, made no mistake. He didn't need that mandatory radio message that would come from a Bono or a Toto Wolff saying, just bring it home. In fact, when he was told 5 laps to go, let's bring it home, guess what he did? He put in the fastest lap of the race. Just,
Exactly.
we don't know if it's too early to write him as a world champion, much like no one knows. But what we saw today was definitely very, very interesting. And I'd love to see if there is suddenly that bump in Kimi Antonelli's development curve after these two races in China and Japan.
But the pace was the incredible part. I did not expect him to be this quick the whole weekend, Kunal.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said this, since not too long ago, you were a teenager. First teenager to lead the Formula One Drivers' World Championship, 19 years and 216 days. First teenager to win multiple Grand Prix. And wow, I mean, I'd love to, I'd love to see how he tries to hold on to George Russell charging at him, because that is going to happen as well. Will will Mercedes' dynamics over these 4 weeks? George Russell is suddenly going to be like 3 races in, and guess what? I'm the one not leading the World Drivers' Championship. I'm the one who's on the back foot.
Exactly.
How is he going to handle these 4 weeks? And will this change any of the dynamics within the Mercedes garages already? Because we know who's sort of chosen as his blue-eyed boy, right?
Very clearly. Very clearly. Could George end up being the middle child? Oh man, so many stories as we head into Miami. But we'll also do a more detailed episode in the break. We'll talk about so many stories that's happening off the track, what F1 needs to keep in mind while changing, and what they could change in more detail, like all the smaller things in the regulations. We should speak a lot more about that in the
Let's
few weeks that we have off.
let's bring back our pits to podium episodes. We can
Absolutely.
discuss absolute fun Formula One stuff, which is Formula One, but stuff that you've probably not heard of, but very happy to discuss. And wow, 3 races in. Let's see what the new World Championship brings from Miami.
Should be fun. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media pages, folks, at Inside Line F1 Pod on Instagram and YouTube. Kunal's active on Twitter at Kunal A. Shah. I'm more active on Instagram at I am Soumil Arora. And we'll be here on the Inside Line F1 Podcast YouTube page and on the podcast as well, if you're listening to us across the multiple audio platforms where we are active. But wait for a bit. More speaking, more talking, more discussions on these regulations will be out in a bit. Make sure you're following us, folks. Bye bye.